We got Avery Carl here today, making $36,000 at age 26, bought her first rental property. Now she is a short-term rental queen. She teaches other people how to do it. You know, we've talked about long-term buy and hold real estate, but what about getting into the Airbnb game? And on my dad's shortwave radio, it's my new friend, Avery Carl. Avery, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm so happy to finally talk to you. And I really like this topic, and I didn't know how to approach it. And I don't believe a lot of people in the area of real estate. And then our mutual friend, Mindy Jensen, said, you have to talk to Avery Carl. And if Mindy says you're awesome, then I went and I did my own homework, like everybody should. And you are awesome. But I think the way we introduce how awesome you are, let's talk about your background a little bit. Tell me about you and your family's relationship growing up to Destin, Florida, because that really is the start of your story, I think.
Yeah, it is. So I grew up in Mississippi, and if you live in the Southeast and even the Midwest, the place you go on vacation to the beach is Destin, Florida, or 30A, that little area. And we went every year. Where are you?
I'm in Texarkana, by the way, Avery.
Okay.
I'm in Texarkana, and everybody here goes to Destin, Florida. And it's funny because I'm from Detroit, so I didn't know anything about it. And then a couple years ago, we went to Grayton Beach for the first time, which is right there. Just amazing. Just amazing.
I live about 10 minutes from Grayton. It's awesome.
Show off.
And that's actually where we used to go. So sometimes we would go to Destin, but for about a 5-year stint there, we went to Grayton Beach every year. And I remember when I got old enough to realize what real estate was and what owning a house was, I think I was probably maybe 10. And I thought, man, I want to have one of these houses one day. What do these people do for a living that they can just own these houses? And I was trying to figure out, what do I do for a living to own those houses? And it turns out I own those houses for a living. But the goal was always, I want one of those Grayton houses. And I still don't have a Grayton house. They're way too expensive, but I have stuff around it. So that's where it started.
And it seems like also, and you told me this, it seems like it's safer, especially for people starting out with what you do, to start with less expensive properties than Grayton Beach will be. Because for people who don't know Grayton Beach, these are bajillion-dollar houses, I think is the technical term.
Yeah, pretty scientific.
Is
Yes.
it safer to start a little downstream of that, though, if you're beginning with your first house?
Absolutely. So my first short-term rental was $150,000. And you absolutely do not have to go spend a bajillion dollars to make money. As a matter of fact, you can have a lower return on investment on a bajillion-dollar beachfront house than a house like 3 or 4 blocks back that's still walkable, but is, a quarter of the price.
Yeah. On back to your story, you started doing short-term rentals while living in New York City. And by the way, nothing makes me think of how do I make money off this more than renting in New York City, because it seems like you lived in an apartment with 3 people, and one of your roommates was doing something really cool.
Yeah. So we were all musicians. We would go on tour at different times, and one of my roommate's boyfriend, his name was Ian, he owns several short-term rentals the right way that we helped him buy now. But back then, it was before there were a lot of regulations. Airbnb was still pretty new. And every time he went on tour, he would Airbnb his room in the apartment, which I thought he was a total trash bag for doing that. I was like, man, he's just getting around having to have a job. What's he going to do in 10 years when he needs to work? And He had 4 or 5 different apartments that he rented and then subleased on Airbnb. It's called rental arbitrage. Now this was back before that was a thing. And I totally thought he was scummy.
And talk about something that not only did you think was scummy, but even when I read it now, I mean, they went so far as to there was like a futon in the kitchen they were renting out to people at one point.
Yeah. So they built a wall in their living room and turned it into another bedroom. So they were short-term renting that bedroom. And then there was just a couch in the kitchen that people would rent. And there was one time I went over there and it was like a young girl, like a 20-year-old girl. And I was thinking, what are you doing? Just renting couches in people's kitchens. What are you thinking? But they made money and they made friends doing that. And here, they're doing great today. He's now I think he's an electrical engineer and he owns probably 10 short-term rentals on the side. So he's doing pretty good.
Wow. Well, yeah, I like the friendship piece of that, but also you said, I mean, these people are musicians. They're probably struggling some, and you said it brought the rent down quite a bit. And for people that are adventurous, people that backpack through Europe or like hostels, having a futon in somebody's kitchen's fine for them. It sounded like from your characterization, like that futon was rented a good number of nights.
It was, which is completely shocking to me because I was basically raised on Law and Order SVU, and I would never. But people did it, and I kind of forgot about it, that he had done that. And we moved to Nashville, and we bought a rental house. We didn't even really know, like, it was called real estate investing. It was just for long term. It was just like a place to put some money and hopefully get some appreciation and like pay for our future kids' college one day. And when the checks started rolling in from that, we thought, wow, let's do this. Like, we want to build a business out of this. So then we started educating ourselves after we spent the, $25,000, $30,000 down payment. Then we started learning how to do it. Right. So we had just a little bit of money left, and we said, okay, well, what are we going to do? What can we buy that's going to make the most amount of money the fastest so that we can then go buy more of these? And we landed on short-term rentals, and we'd just been on vacation to the Smoky Mountains, which is a few hours east of Nashville. And we said, okay, well, we can do this. This is a place where people go all the time. All they do is rent cabins. Somebody owns these cabins. Why can't it be us? We didn't want to do it in Nashville because the regulations are crazy there. And then we thought, well, let's look at who's going to manage this for us. So we looked at property management, and it was like 40% of your gross income. And we thought, well, that's not going to work. Well, Ian was renting his futon while he was off on tour in Europe. We can certainly manage this thing from Nashville. And so we figured out how to do that. And that one worked out really, really well. We scaled from 1 to 5 over the course of about 18 months. And I mean, 5 years later, we have 189 doors. Only 9 of them are short terms, by the way. But because the short terms made so much money and make so much money, they cash flow so heavy, we were able to do exactly what we set out to do, which was scale a portfolio as quickly as possible without over leveraging ourselves, of course. And we were able to do that much more quickly because of our short term rentals than if we'd done traditional long term upfront.
Avery, you said 50 things there that I want to dive into because so many of us know so little about this. But even before we get to that, I want to ask you about something else that's important because there's a lot of people out there that hate their jobs. When you moved from New York City with your boyfriend, now husband, to Nashville, he was able to kind of transfer in the job that he does there pretty easily. But for you, you were going back to get your master's, and that ended up for you. And I think this was a pretty powerful thing. It seemed like you'd done the math and you thought by getting a master's that would make more money, but that ended up being a dead end for you.
It was, absolutely. And it maybe if I'd stayed in it longer, it might have made some more money. But yeah, I said, okay, I've been playing music and bartending for a long time, and it's really difficult to transfer into like the corporate world from bartending. It's kind of like a stigma almost. So I thought, well, I'll go get my master's and that'll help me transition. And so I did. And then I had 3 corporate jobs in 3 years, got nearly fired from all 3. I got put on a performance improvement plan. For those of you HR directors out there who know what that is, which basically means they're giving you 30 days to, quote, improve. But really what they're telling you is like, hey, this is your notice. We're going to fire you in 30 days. It happened twice.
I'm laughing, by the way, because it's not funny. By the way, it totally isn't funny. And yeah, as you know, you're scared to death when that happens because you can see the writing on the wall. But I'm laughing because of the fact that it's just such a nightmare. You have to laugh so you don't cry. So.
Yeah, it was terrible. I was up all night, every night. I'm like, oh my God, I thought I was this like decently smart person, and I'm so stupid. I can't even like do this $40,000 job without getting fired. It's like bad for your confidence. And so we already had one investment at that point, and I had been working on my real estate license because my husband is a terrible client. He's a New Yorker. Like, his negotiation skills are like, I'm going to slam your face into this door handle. And so I'm like super Southern and overly apologetic about everything. So I'm like,
I was gonna say, that does not work in the South.
No,
that does not work in Mississippi at all. It does not fly. Yeah.
No. So I was getting my license because I was embarrassed of his behavior and having to like apologize to all of our real estate agents. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get this license and I'll do our deals. But my job was kind of falling apart at the same time that this was happening. So I thought, well, I'll just go into real estate because I had friends who were saying, oh, you're making how much on that cabin in the Smokies? Help me get one. Show me how to do it. So I'd sell them the cabin, show them how to run it, and move on. And then turns out that was a niche in real estate that needed to be filled. That was a hole in the market. So I just kind of became the short-term rental agent. And now we've got offices in 11 markets where we sell people short-term rentals and teach them how to manage it so that they can also quit their jobs if they want.
How long did it take you? Did you have enough money coming in that you didn't have to swim a moat? Like, I mean, for a lot of people, there's a period where the dream of working for yourself is great, but it's not paying the bills like you want it to at first. How long did it take you to swim that moat, or were you able to successfully transition right away and you're making enough money from the legwork you've done ahead of time to be able to afford your lifestyle?
Here's the thing. There are a lot of people who sell Airbnb investor courses and have YouTube channels and stuff out there that they're like, buy two rentals and quit your job. Like I was a lot of them's agent. I taught a lot of them how to do it. I was able to quit my corporate job after 2, but here's the difference between me and a lot of people. I was making $37,000 a year. That's nothing. That's pennies. So 2 short-term rentals will cover that. But my advice to other people would be to stay in your job as long as you can so you can max out your conventional loans and your DTI, because there is no type of financing that is going to be easier to get with better terms than conventional loans. So keep that income as long as you can. Don't watch a freaking YouTube channel and then run off and quit your job when you've owned 2 Airbnbs for less than 6 months and you haven't even owned anything during a slow season. Keep your job and maximize it.
I didn't even think about that the banker's not going to like that at all. Yeah. Hey, what income stream do you have? None.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I totally hadn't thought about that. So, but I want to go back to that first rental property that you had, because this theme that I like, Avery, is that you don't have to be perfect at first. And I think all of us, people that you coach and people that listen to the show, you get nervous that you're going to mess stuff up. But you write about how, man, you messed up a lot of stuff on that first property. You bought a house with a little bit of land, but your realtor kept talking to you about this kind of this really nice neighborhood, that chic neighborhood. And you ended up, your first property was just outside of that, if I remember the story correctly. What did you screw up on that house? How did you get that first rental property completely wrong?
Well, we were about, I would say, maybe 4.5 cocktails in when we signed those closing docs. So, I mean, the offer docs. So maybe don't do that.
Don't be drunk when you sign your closing document.
Yeah, but that particular property, yeah. So the only thing we did wrong on that property was that we didn't know what we were doing, but it ended up being a learning experience because we shot first and asked questions later. If we had known what we were doing, if we had done all these analysis and listened to all the podcasts and read all the books, we might not have just jumped. So it ended up being the right thing that we jumped and figured it out later, because that property did end up being a really good property for just a little single family long-term. The mortgage on it was $650 a month and we were renting it out for $1,500 a month. So that's really good for a little long term. So I would say do not drink and sign offers, but that one ended up being really good for us.
All right. And then, like you said, you went to the Smoky Mountains, and that's a beautiful area, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, that spot. And you're right, everybody stays in these beautiful rental cabins. Is that where people should look for short-term rentals, in these places like Destin, like the Smoky Mountains, these vacation areas where there's going to be a lot of traffic?
I will preface this with, this is just the way that I've done it. There are people who are successful doing it other ways, but for me, I will only buy a short-term rental in a regional drivable vacation destination. So an area that gets a lot of tourism, like the Smoky Mountains or Destin, and all of that tourism is driving in. I don't like markets that you have to fly to, because in a downturn, when people don't have a lot of money, those are the first to go away. And then in a global pandemic, when people don't want to be cooped up in a flight together, those are also the first to go away. But people will, even if they don't have a lot of extra money right now, or if they don't want to get sick, they will stay in control of their own environment and drive their own car to a place that's 5 to 10 hours away from their house. So those markets are the most recession resistant, and they also have typically the most favorable regulations, because places like Destin or the Smokies, there's not a lot of hotels. Really, the only accommodations are short-term rentals. So the cities and counties figured out how to regulate that and make money off of it decades ago.
You found that that a lot of the real estate people that you called couldn't answer your more technical questions, because by this point you'd figured out some of the formulas, you'd read some, and then also they kept pointing you to this regional management company that you said was just going to charge you an arm and a leg. How do you find the right real estate people? You went and got your own real estate license. Is that what you'd advise people to do if they get serious about this? Go get your real estate license yourself?
Not necessarily, because in order, especially now, the way the market is now, you need an agent who is plugged in and who's done a lot of deals, because they have a lot of contacts to help you dig up. There's no inventory right now. So an agent that's really plugged in with all the other agents in the market, and then also has a lot of past clients where they can dig up deals for you, is really helpful. When I got my license, it was a very different time. There were no agents that really own properties. There's a lot more of them now. And there just weren't really any agents who could even answer simple questions like, hey, how much do you think this will make a year? That's not hard to figure out.
I could read your frustration when you were writing that.
It was frustrating. And the big local property management companies in any market back then, now they've had to lower their prices to keep up with self-managers, but it was 40% of your gross income on a property. Holy
moly.
And now, yeah. And now it's about 25 is the average. But to give you just an example of what that actually looks like. So I had 8 short-term rentals last year. 2 of them were only online for about 6 months. If I'd paid somebody 25% of my gross, I would have paid somebody $200,000 to manage my properties.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there goes anything you could have made. Like it's all gone bye-bye.
Yeah.
At the end of the introduction, you lay out your system, and obviously we don't have time to get into your entire system, but I do want to ask about the 7 steps that you have and list them off so that people get an understanding of really some of the legwork that you have to do. And if you don't mind, just a couple sentences on each of these, Avery, about the mistake you see people make, a big mistake that we can help people avoid today. Okay. Number 1, you say choosing your market. Where do people get that wrong?
They choose a market that has bad regulations. Like Nashville, for example. I always pick on Nashville. Sorry, Nashville folks, but I used to live there, and people would come to me and say, hey, I found this awesome $1 million property. It'll make a great Airbnb. Let's buy it. And I'd have to say, did you check the regulations? You can't short-term rent this. So choosing the wrong market with bad regulations.
Number 2 then on your list is choosing your property. Where do we mess that up?
You want to choose a property based on what makes the most sense, on what meets the most expectations for the most tourists coming in. So where I see people make a mistake is buying a property for themselves personally that might not be appealing to the mass tourism coming in.
Oh, that's great advice. Number 3, setting up your listings. I bet this is an important one where people screw it up constantly.
Okay, this one really hurts my brain to have to say, because I preach this to every single one of my clients and I still see them do it. Get professional photos. Do not think that your iPhone is good enough, because it's not good enough. You need a pro photos. The photos are the first things that people see when they're scrolling through, and you're not going to get clicked on if it's just like a weird iPhone photo that was taken at night and you can see the light fixture and it's like a weird sun in there. Yep. Pro photos, 100%.
I will tell you, when we moved from Detroit, case in point of exactly what you're talking about, that when we bought our house versus when we sold it, we ended up there far shorter than we thought. We were only there 2 years. And so we didn't make hardly any of the improvements we wanted. Really, we made almost no improvement, but we worked with a phenomenal real estate person, because I've always believed that that is a hugely important thing, to be surrounded by the right professionals. And Brian, our guy, Avery, took such good pictures that we got hella more money for our house without doing nearly anything to it, just because the pictures were brighter, they were happier. That we didn't have clutter. Like the clutter I see in people's pictures drives me crazy. And so nobody was looking at the house when we bought it. When we sold it, we had 6 people look at it the first day and 4 offers. and we had done next to nothing. So I love the picture thing. That is just, you can't state that heavily enough for me. All right. Number 4, setting up your systems. I guess probably we don't have a system might be where we get that wrong.
Okay, so the biggest mistake I make there's a lot of mistakes to make with systems, but people who do not use a dynamic pricing tool and just try to manually price their entire year, you're leaving money on the table. And also don't use the Airbnb pricing tool. That's set to get you the lowest price. You want to use an external pricing tool like Price Labs. Our income went up 20% just when we switched over from manual pricing to using Price Labs.
Yeah, but is Price Labs the name of that badass app that Wendy May showed me in San Diego a few days ago? She told me that you told her or led her to this fantastic app, and she was flipping through it, and this thing was amazing.
Probably. So what it does is it whatever algorithm is in there, I'm not going to pretend to be some sort of engineer, but it's constantly analyzing past and present booking data in the market that you're buying based on property size, events that are happening. So there might be an event happening that you don't even know about is happening that you could jack your prices up much higher and get a much higher price per night. And it does all that for you. So you're not having to keep up with it. So it's a pretty amazing tool.
Which you should be just to be competitive. You know, you're not ripping people off. You're just being competitive. You're leaving money on the table if you don't do that. Yeah. Number 5 is launching. Where do we mess it up?
The biggest mistake that I see is people trying to launch too soon after closing. So I've seen people that will have a booking starting the day of closing. And
oh man.
Yeah, that's dumb because all kinds of things can happen with lenders and title companies, and we need to push closing back for whatever reason, or you don't actually get possession of the house until the loan funds, which can be the next day, or sometimes if it's on a Friday, will be on Monday, and you don't actually have possession of the house, and you have to call your guests and say, hey, I actually don't own this yet. And so give yourself a buffer between your close date and your launch date. Do not try to butt those two right up against each other because that is playing with fire.
Well, and you emphasize over and over that the key to this game too is getting great reviews, and if you start off that way, Avery, you're asking for a horrible review as your first review.
Yeah, it's getting off on the wrong foot.
Yeah. Number 6, rolling with the punches. We can obviously say that not rolling with the punches is it, but where do we end up taking punches that we don't expect?
Micromanaging your guests.
Oh.
Yeah. Watching your cameras too closely. Like, yeah, you want to have a Ring doorbell camera just in case something happens, but you don't want to be monitoring that all day. Your doorbell camera is for if something happens for you to go back and look. It's not for you to spy on people all day.
Oh, that's creepy. That makes me not want to stay in an Airbnb. I got cameras all over. And number 7, and this is powerful, scaling. And I feel like the problem there might be that we don't do it. We don't think in terms of scale, Avery.
Yeah, a lot of people will say, oh, look at me. I bought these 4 short-term rentals and now I quit my job and now I'm financially free. And I see a lot of people who are like my age and younger. I'm 33 that will do that. And I'm like, you guys don't even have kids yet. You don't know the expense that is coming if you decide to have kids. So like quitting your job too early and not scaling. And then a lot of people think that short-term rentals are the right and only way, and they're not. Multifamily is a very tried and true investing strategy as well as single-family long-terms. And it's not wrong to only buy short-term rentals, but I prefer to use short-term rentals, and I think the right way is to just use them as a cash flow turbocharger to build a portfolio that is diverse, that has all types of real estate in it, and not just focusing on the short terms.
You're 33 years old. Tell me how many properties you own, short-term and long-term properties?
189.
189 at 33 years old. That is amazing. And that's all building your team. The book is Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth, your guide to analyzing, buying, and managing vacation properties. I'm assuming available on Amazon, but available everywhere, available other places?
Everywhere you can buy books. Bigger Pockets bookstore. It's a little bit cheaper there if you buy direct from them. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Audible, all of it.
It's such a great ecosystem. Do you read the Audible yourself?
No, thank God. No, they hired a professional voice actor for that.
That is crazy. I had fun reading my book, but I can see how it wouldn't be fun saying the same phrase 17 times.
I hate to hear my own voice, which I know is crazy since I have a podcast too, but like I would just obsess over, oh my God, am I saying my S is weird? Did I say, I could not get through it. It would not be possible. It would just be too anxiety inducing.
Speaking of your podcast, Avery, we can't let you off the hook without hearing a little bit of the podcast because I've enjoyed it. This is an interesting interview that you just did with John Goldstein, I think is his name.
Josh, yeah.
And, or Josh Goldstein. Yes. And you and Josh have a fantastic conversation. I'd like everybody to hear just a little bit of your podcast. You ask him about Big Bear. He is in another place where there's a lot of traffic and a lot of people that drive to Big Bear. There are a lot of regulations there, and you ask about whether there's got to be people that are within 30 minutes because a lot of communities now have these regulations where somebody has to be close by, and also local cleaners, things like that. So you ask him. Are there companies that do it in Big Bear? Did you have to go find somebody? Let's hear what he has to say.
Okay, with that, is that how it is there, or do you have to is there a specific company that you have to use?
There are a lot of cleaners that do it, but because it's such a big thing in Big Bear, there are a lot of companies that just do 24/7 compliance. So, because another thing that you have to do is they'll offer to go and check the people in to make sure that there's the number of people that they said when they booked it, that there's not more. And as long as they do that, if later they add more people, they're in violation of the city code. And then that compliance officer will go down and kick people out, basically.
Boy, and I never thought about that, Avery. And I thought that was a wonderful part of your show, that you really got to pay attention to the local compliance. And I got to imagine that's going to be different everywhere.
Yeah, it is going to be different everywhere. So whenever you're choosing a market, you definitely want to make sure that you're calling the city or calling the county if it's not in the city limits and seeing exactly what the rules are.
Well, Avery, thanks so much for helping us with short-term rentals today. Your website, if people want to just learn more and then before they dive into the book?
It's theshorttermshop.com.
And the Short-Term Shop, the Short-Term Show, also have the book. We'll have all the links at stackingbenjamins.com on our show notes page. Thanks for hanging out with us. It was great meeting you, finally, after I've heard so much about how awesome it is when people work with you. So thanks a ton.
Oh, thank you.